This is the Chiefs' official podcast network.
Touchdown, Kansas City! What's up, boys? Let's go! What's up? Let's go! Linebackers on three. 1, 2, 3.
Hey, Chiefs Kingdom, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches. I am Chiefs reporter BJ Kissel, joined as always by Super Bowl champion, Big 12 champion, Texan, and holder of a 94 overall rating in NCAA football 2004, Nick Leckey. Nick, what's going on, man?
Not a whole lot.
Get your jazz hands.
Just trying to stay sane.
I'd
Right.
like to know how week 2 of quarantining is going for you as we do our second episode remotely here of In the Trenches. How are things for you? How's life up at Lake Quivira area?
It's doing good. Starting to get out more, starting to do some things just around the house, walk on some trails, things like that with the family. Haven't really gone crazy yet. I'm sleeping in a little bit later. I'm sleeping until 7:30. So I kind of like that, the kids and stuff, and they watch TV. But I can see a slow degradation. So we're trying to keep our sanity. Still got our Lego project going on, and that's really all about us. What about you? How are you doing?
Doing well. The problem we like to take walks and stuff, but since you can't stop at playgrounds, we got 2 young kids and they don't understand how they can't get on the playground. It makes it a little tricky, but the weather was so nice yesterday. It was nice to get outside. I think every dad in the neighborhood was was mowing the lawn because the weather was so nice and it dried out a little bit. So that was good. But for anybody out there, if any Chiefs fans are getting super bored and just need that football fix, we talked about it before, but NFL.com has opened up Game Pass for a segment of time here where it's free. You get in there and watch any NFL game that you want, NFL.com/Game Pass. Get on there and watch some old Chiefs games. We're going to have the watch party Wednesday again on Wednesday. It'll be Matt McMullen and Mitch Holtis and myself will break down the Baltimore Ravens game back in week 3. That one should be a whole lot of fun. But Nick, as we go through this episode and we just kind of segment this out, we've got 5 segments like normal here in the off season. The first one that I want to start with is just the addition of Demarcus Robinson coming back. Now, the one thing that needs to be said here, is it gets kind of tricky, especially with everything going on, is that the signing is not yet official. The Chiefs have not announced it. It's been reported out there by some trustworthy people who are pretty good at this, but nothing has been confirmed from the Chiefs. So when we talk about it, it's not a confirmation of it. But when you saw the news about Demarcus Robinson, what was your initial reaction?
Well, I thought it was cool because, you get those pieces in place together again. You're looking for weapons as always. And I think it's amazing what this free agency is doing. It's like, those big deals aren't really coming out quite just yet amidst all the other news. But I think it's good to show those guys who are coming up through the system that, you play well here, we'll reward you, we'll give you another 1-year deal. And it's sort of also to Demarcus, it kind of says, hey, listen, we know you had some plays last year. We'd like you to be more consistent throughout the season. We know you're still learning everything. And I think it's a good sign. It's a really good sign. And then I think a hungry person is always the best type of person. And so, I was pleased with this contract where it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah, I think when you look at the numbers, he finished with 449 yards and 4 touchdowns last year. And he's gotten better each year that he's been here. And that's something you've seen the development and just being able to understand all the different positions and being able to line up at all the different spots. And really, you've seen a lot of his big plays come when plays break down, that he's just really good at being on the same page, whether it's just kind of a sixth sense with him and Patrick Mahomes on where he needs to be at the right time. But I think the biggest area that we saw Demarcus really step was when early in the season when Tyreek Hill got hurt in that game against the Jaguars. And you look at those next 4 weeks, in those 4 games, Robinson had 279 yards and 3 touchdowns in those 4 games without Tyreek Hill, including obviously the huge game that he had against the Oakland Raiders in week 2, where he went off for 6 catches, 172 yards, and a couple of touchdowns, and then came back the next week against the Ravens and had a huge touchdown reception. So I think when you look at Demarcus Robinson, I think, any player when they get to free agency is going to want to get that 3, 4, 5-year deal, that multi-year deal, and kind of set you up. But not knowing what the Chiefs are going to look like, at least the wide receiver room, because of all the reports about Sammy Watkins and how are they going to handle that, there's a chance. Now, we don't know yet because Sammy's still on the team right now and they're working stuff out based on reports. Again, we don't know. But if Sammy wasn't to come back, that maybe there was a bigger opportunity for Demarcus Robinson to take a larger role in this offense that is going to put up numbers with Patrick Mahomes, and then next year becomes a free agent coming off a bigger role type of year with the Chiefs, and that maybe put him in a really big situation, a really good situation to kind of cash in again. But I think when you look at it as a Chiefs fan, you got to be thrilled with the fact that you kept that entire wide receiver core together from last year. As things stand right now, outside of Marcus Kemp is the only receiver who was on the team last year who's not returning, and he was injured in the preseason. And there's still a chance that he may come back down the road, but right now, I think when you look at Demarcus Robinson, it's a good deal for both sides, assuming that Demarcus's role continues to evolve and continues to get bigger, and he can put up even bigger numbers than we saw last year.
Well, and I heard what you said too about keeping that wide receiver room together, because I think you have some really good chemistry there, and I think that it's important for from a negotiation point, D-Rob too, is just to say, hey, listen, prove it here, right? We're going to try and do some things, and this is kind of our way of saying, you have a chance, to earn some more trust, right? And I think that's going to be the benefactor, and then have some more roles on special teams too.
Yeah, I think when you look at the wide receiver position, as much as we talk about Patrick Mahomes being the best player in the NFL, because he is, we can't just assume that it would be easy to play receiver, not only in this offense, but with a quarterback who can make all the different throws, the no-look passes, can play outside the pocket, and kind of the off-script type of deals, that it takes time to work with that to be on the level of being able to step in and compete for a Super Bowl caliber team for a young receiver or a receiver you brought from the outside. So I think it's only positive things that Demarcus Robinson is back in the mix. According to reports out there, obviously, again, nothing has been confirmed by the Chiefs yet. Obviously, they're working through the physicals and all the different things that are coming into play with all the social distancing and the quarantining that people are going through right now. But Nick, let's move on to the second segment of this, and that's just kind of a free agency update on kind of where we're at right now. When we met last week on the show, we had talked about Antonio Hamilton. We talked about Mike Rimmer's additions, and since then, the Chiefs have brought back Mike Pennell, which we kind of talked about and kind of hinted at that would be a really good thing, considering just how he kind of provided that energy, that spark when he first arrived for the Chiefs. But they did lose three guys that were free agents that have since signed with other teams, so they won't be re-signing with the Chiefs. And that would be safety Jordan Lucas joined the Chicago Bears, tight end Blake Bell joining the Dallas Cowboys, and then Reggie Ragland signing with the Detroit Lions. Those are three guys who at different times stepped up and had roles for the Chiefs during this Super Bowl team, but obviously three guys whose production, however much, whether it was special teams with a guy like Jordan Lucas and even Blake Bell, and then Reggie Ragland really stepping in certain scenarios against certain looks and really providing a spark for the defense, particularly in the run defense.
I really liked Blake Bell this past year because, he had some key blocks on some touchdowns, especially down in the red zone, lining up in the slot with that blocking. And he was a good special teams contributor. I think tight ends play a special role in your special teams, in the fact that, they can be on the punt team, they can cover, they have size, and they can also make some tackles. So they're always valuable. And then I just like Blake Bell's effort, obviously. I think, coming out of, I think he was like Oklahoma, he switched roles there, and, he's just a team player. And I like anybody who's an ex-quarterback. I think they know routes very well. And then, me, I love Reggie Ragland. I thought he was underutilized at first. I caught some glimpses of him with run stopping. I really liked how he performed in December. And I think, that's why, you go off and sign somewhere else, is when, especially a defensive-minded guy with Patricia, that I think Reggie Ragland is going to play a key piece there for them, just as far as run stuffing and then special teams as well.
Yeah, a couple quick stories about Reggie Ragland, because he was one of the guys that had a chance to spend quite a bit of time around. And we had a chance, me and a few of our producers went down to his hometown in Huntsville, Alabama, spent some time with him and his family, and then actually drove down to Tuscaloosa, went to Bryant-Denny, kind of got a tour of the stadium and have him just kind of show us around and show us what Alabama football looks like from behind the scenes. And obviously he's treated like royalty down there. So we got the tour and all of that. But the couple things that always are going to stand out about Reggie, other than the fact that he was always available to the media and he was always nice. You walk in the locker room, he's going to sit there, he'd answer all your questions. But a fun story, and I've never told this story before, but last summer, my wife and I went down to CMA Fest in Nashville, Tennessee. And it's a long story, but we were over at Lucas Oil getting ready for a concert one of the nights. There was a break between bands or whatever. And I went to charge my cell phone, and it was one of those like charging stations. And one of the girls who was there was working for, I think, like the Country Music Hall of Fame. She was doing social media for him, and her phone was dying. So she was sitting there charging it, and that was like her lifeline. And we just got to talking, and she told me how big of an Alabama football fan she was. And the more she talked about it, the more that I realized that she wasn't just like, oh, I like Alabama. Like, she could tell you everything about Alabama football. And I just randomly said, like, do you like Reggie Ragland? And she goes, he's one of my favorite players. And I was like, well, have you ever talked to him? She was like, oh, no, I've never talked to him before. I was like, all right. So I FaceTimed Reggie real fast. And I was like, hey, man, do me a favor. Like, this girl's a really big Alabama fan. And she was playing on her phone, wasn't paying attention. So I just handed my phone to her, and she looked down and started talking to Reggie Ragland. And Reggie was awesome. He talked to her for like 2 minutes. And then we got off the phone, and she started crying. She was like, that was so amazing. And I got off and told him that story, and he was just like, he's so accessible. And this is the middle of the summer. It was just a cool story, and just kind of how he is. He spent some time, talked with her a little bit, joked around, put a smile on her face. So he's a good dude. I texted him right after I saw the news. He's happy. If you know anything about Reggie or follow him on any social media, he's always singing Motown songs or always singing R&B. So him going up to Detroit, living in Motown is a perfect place for him. I know he's going to enjoy it up there.
That's so cool. You did that, BJ. That's really cool.
All right, let's move on to the third segment of this show, and that's just kind of how the Scouts are handling the quarantining. So there haven't been any public press conferences or anything like that with Brett Veach, so we don't have a lot of the details as far as exactly what they're going to be doing or how they're kind of working this. We know that their processes are staying the same, just the communication is different. They're still watching film, still going through their processes, and one of the cool things is that most of the work is already done ahead of time. The grades on players from watching the film throughout the year, the information from the area scouts, all that stuff's already been tabulated even before the combine. So where their grades are pretty set. They don't change a whole lot except for medical and character, which are two of the things, obviously, that these quarantining, these social distancing guidelines can kind of affect. So as somebody who's gone through that process, Nick, when you look back, just how difficult do you feel like this process would have been for you as a player? Not having the opportunity to go in person and meet with these teams and do the physicals and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think it's similar to anybody when you do like a phone interview or you do an in-person interview. Some people perform differently over the phone than when you do it in person. And I think just seeing size-wise, comparatively speaking, because I think if you look at, like, say, we're talking about like a Reggie Ragland, where you look at someone who's like 6'3", 215, looks different than a safety who's, maybe 6'3", 210. And I think it's good to see body types and body sizes, because weight isn't necessarily like weight looks different on everybody. And some people carry weight well and some people carry it poorly. And I think that eye test, where you see someone, you're like, wow, that looks a lot different than they look on film. Some people are proportional, and it's just good to see that. And I think as a scout, I feel like you miss that element of not being able to go to a pro day and not be able to see how this person looks versus other people. And I know looks isn't anything and doesn't make a bit of a difference, but it just gives you an idea for someone, and it gives you an idea for, muscle mass, like, and are they workout warriors, and how they're looking on the field, and, can they withstand certain plays and certain formations, certain schemes. So it really eliminates a huge chunk, but you're right. I mean, I think the film never lies. And I think that, eye test is about 10% of it.
Yeah, the couple of things that I was thinking about when we were just getting ready for this episode that you kind of forget about, that are just cool experiences that probably, when you really look at it, probably don't have a huge determining factor on like the final roster, but things like the local pro day, where guys who grew up within a certain amount of, certain number of miles from Arrowhead Stadium, from Chiefs Kingdom, who grew up in the area, who aren't going to play in the NFL. Most of those guys don't. They just play at a smaller school and grew up in the area. But they get the opportunity to go put on the Chiefs jersey, go to the facility, and go through a workout led by professional coaches. And like I said, maybe there were 3 or 4 guys that ended up on a training camp. Maybe one guy gets drafted each year from the 30 or 40 guys who show up every year. But it's just one of those cool experiences for guys who grew up, a lot of whom grew up fans of the Chiefs, get to go there and go through that workout and be around Brett Veach and be around Coach Reed and their staffs. And just, that's one of the things that's disappointing about this, knowing that those guys aren't necessarily going to get that opportunity. And I think you brought up a great point, and just kind of getting a feel for guys. It's kind of difficult on the phone. We know the NFL is setting that up as far as the top 30 visits they always did. How are they going to do that via FaceTime, Skype, Zoom meetings, however they're going to do it? But I think the one thing that this is really going to shine a light on is how important the area scouts are in determining, the character of a player, because you're not going to get a chance to sit that player down in front of all your coaches and all your scouts in person, where you're really relying on that information that those area scouts get from the schools, from the head coaches, obviously at those schools, the position coaches, but also the support staff. And that gets lost a lot. And I think like the strength coaches end up being huge resources for area scouts to know what kind of work ethic a player has, during the off season. Is he hitting it as hard in the middle of April to his workouts and being on time as he is during the season? And those kinds of things, I think, always carry a lot more weight than I think maybe fans realize, but especially during a time like now in a building where you are kind of limited on the information and the process that you're used to going through, that those area scouts and that information that they can get is even more important now than it's ever been. And so whether it's the academic support people, or whether it's just people around the university and the networking, because you know how small a world it gets in the football world, that information becomes increasingly vital. And any player that has question marks about their character or things in their past, it may be more difficult. And what we may see, and you've seen kind of the reports online, is that's what it may affect our guys that could have otherwise came in the building and answered some questions. If they don't get an opportunity to do that, that becomes a bigger risk to take that player in the draft. So maybe we see those guys drop and not getting drafted, and those become UDFAs.
And I think that's so true. And I think, seeing everything that you mentioned with regards to work ethic and backgrounds, and those are key too. And sometimes, you can do well and good over the phone, but then, it's tough to read people, even through video chat. It's just tough to read the situation in the room. And you're right. Maybe it affects, your accuracy by about, 5 or 10%.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the fourth segment. And that's a question that we got, and we put this out on Twitter, which would be your favorite game to rewatch. As this is like the time of the year for like lists and debates and all those just like subjective conversations. Subjective conversations. I don't appreciate that, Nick. But for me, it's easy. And it's funny because I actually was rewatching this game this week because we're prepping for the watch party Wednesday that we've got on Wednesday night that I had mentioned, or Wednesday afternoon, excuse me. But I think it's the Baltimore Ravens game, looking back, because I think, no disrespect to the Patriots or the Titans or anybody else last year, but I feel like the Baltimore Ravens were the second best team in the AFC. And to see both of those teams go at it, to see Lamar Jackson, who ended up winning the MVP, go up against Patrick Mahomes, who is the best player in football, I think that's exactly what you want as a football fan. And we got to see that early in the season when the Chiefs were dealing with some injuries and the Ravens had the best defense in football, and they had the highest scoring offense in football. And we got to see them go at it at Arrowhead Stadium.
You're right, and I think that was a really cool game too, because we see what you can do to the Baltimore's offense to try and stymie them. And I remember being at the game in person. I thought it was a really cool game to watch, and head to head, and TVs loved it. It's the new generation. You're right.
Yeah, I think when you look back, it's easy to forget that the Chiefs, obviously, they won that game 33-28, but they didn't have Eric Fisher, they didn't have Tyreek Hill. They didn't have Damian Williams in that game. Andrew Wiley got injured and ended up coming back into that game. But you've got one of your offensive linemen who's not in, another one who's less than 100%. And you're going up against a Ravens defense that led the NFL at just 13.5 points per game, had 43 quarterback pressures in just 2 games. They averaged 21.5 pressures on a quarterback, which is ridiculous. And then obviously they're fired up to go up against the Chiefs team that's down their left tackle. So I think looking at the game was cool too, just rewatching, because you saw different guys step up that by the end of the year, when you win the Super Bowl and you're like, everybody had a part in it, it's such a, what have you done for me lately type of league that you kind of forget some of the impact and some of the contributions of some of these players. And a guy like LaShawn McCoy, who had a couple of touchdowns in that game, who had 90 yards, who averaged, I think, over 8 yards per touch in that game. Mecole Hardman, that was one of his first games. Now, he the week before against the Raiders, he had like 60 yards, but he really stepped up against the Ravens. And then Darrell Williams stepped up and made some huge plays before he ended up getting injured. And a guy that a lot of people forget about, he had that hamstring injury. Another guy to kind of keep in mind going into this offseason, a guy that really came into his own there, and Darrell Williams. And then we saw Tyrann Mathieu and Frank Clark really close it out late. But that the Ravens game is the one that I think about when I think about LeSean McCoy and what he was able to do. And everybody kind of talking about what happened with him late in the season, not being active for the playoffs. But you look back at the Ravens game, which they don't win that game. Who knows what ends up happening as far as playoff seeding and all that stuff. It all worked together to put the Chiefs in a position to win that Super Bowl. They don't win that game without LeSean McCoy making plays. And if they don't win that game, what does the playoff picture look like? What does that journey look like?
I agree. And it's so different. And it's unfortunate that most of the time for MVP voting, I mean, you pretty much forget about weeks 1 through 8. You know, when you're looking at like that kind of stuff, like it's same thing with college football is that we have such a short memory that it's like that stuff is just kind of like, it's weeks 1 through 4. We're not going to worry about, we're going to worry about like the last part of the season. And I think really would have looked at that game and see the head-to-head matchup. You're just seeing who was a good quarterback. And I think Lamar made more explosive plays to win another one of those eye tests. You know, he had those fancy plays and he could run the ball. And so I don't think Mahomes is too concerned about losing the back-to-back when you get the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl MVP trophy.
It was cool to see him hang out at the 101 Awards and the respect that they have for one another. I know that the mic'd up later in the season caught Mahomes after he made a play on I think it was a 2-point conversion on the sideline. He's mic'd up, said, "Did I look like Lamar?" Like the respect that they have for each other and what they can do. And I know that it just came out recently as we talk about the offseason. People are searching for content. The greatest rivalry game right now for next year for the Chiefs is the Chiefs-Ravens game, and seeing what the Ravens have done this offseason to bolster their team, adding Calais Campbell and then just adding Derek Wolfe over from Denver and some other pieces that they've brought in there. But they're ready to go. They're trying to make a run. They feel like they've got a quarterback on a rookie deal, and they're going to put some pieces around. And that defensive line and that defensive front, adding Calais Campbell with what they already had with guys like Brandon Williams and all them, they just got a little bit better. A lot bit better.
They really did. And, I would say my favorite game to rewatch is the December 1 home game versus the Raiders. You got to think at that point in the season, you and I were stressing how November, December is where your make or break time. And that Chiefs had a kind of a 50-50 November where, they coming off that Green Bay loss at home on October 27th, beat Minnesota at home, lost to Tennessee on the road, and then they beat the Chargers in Mexico, and they had a bye week. And I think that really this is like the importance of Andy Reid to me too, and like the full backstory is that, he's so good coming out of the bye week, just because he treats his players like men. He lets them go off and do their thing, just get out of town, forget about things. But he stays in the lab. He's there. His truck is there every day. When I came in to do the podcast, whether we did him in the morning or afternoon, he's always there. I think it grows mold on the tires. And I think it was important because, I think they saw that we need to reconfigure how we're playing this game. Our defense has been hustling, working all season, and our offense is still trying to get these, 70-yard, 60-yard, one-off scores, and it's not doing our defense any favors. So what they did versus Oakland, I thought was really cool is, obviously they beat them down 40-9. So you reestablish your home field dominance. You reestablish the defense as being super good. Oakland was struggling and you kept them to struggle. And then you set the tone for the rest of the season. I think that, offense had drives of 11 yards or 11 plays, 8 plays, 9 plays, and 14 plays, and I think that was Chiefs football. That's the Alex Smith football with Mahomes at your home. And I think that was the key to success and a turning point for me.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point in that there was so much momentum after the game in Mexico City that you wanted them to carry that over after the bye week, because we saw them kind of come together and that it wasn't a perfect football game, especially from Patrick Mahomes down in Mexico City, but the defense made enough plays. That's really where we really saw them start to turn a corner, and for them to come home and go up against the Raiders team that it's going to be a rivalry. They're coming into Arrowhead, especially with Steve Spagnuolo and new defensive scheme. How is Derek Carr going to handle it? And for him to go out there and not play very well, it was held to just 66% passing, but had a couple of interceptions, and again just led Oakland to 9 points. It was huge for the Chiefs defense and for the Chiefs just to kind of get on a roll, and they didn't lose another game. They were obviously finishing the regular season with 5 straight wins and then going into the playoffs and winning all those games. But right now let's move to the final segment Nick, and this is the Tell Me Something Cool segment, and I'm going to have you start. Off-season, quarantine life. Tell me something cool.
Man, my something cool is that, I think, this quarantine will end one of these days, and I'm hoping that I maintain these fundamentals that I already have. I feel like I'm getting disciplined as far as eating goes, as far as exercising goes. I think it's you have to see the silver linings, and I feel like we're together as a family, reaching out to friends, and so I'm really trying to find that silver lining and see what we can do, and I think that hoping that these fundamentals transfer over when we start work normally, and then when we start just being out together. And one of them for me would be I'm definitely washing my hands a lot more with soap and water.
Yeah, I think you talked about the Legos and all the stuff that you're doing. I played a lot of Guess Who, a lot of Battleship, which is awesome to get that time with the kiddos. But my Tell Me Something Cool. Actually, I had this idea when I was prepping for the Watch Party Wednesday a couple nights ago. I was watching the Ravens game on NFL Game Pass again. It's open to anybody who wants to go on. NFL made it free if you want to rewatch some of the Chiefs games from last season. But I was rewatching the Ravens game, and they had a shot on the sideline that I kind of stopped and took a picture of, because a lot of times, like for the in-house Chiefs employees, we always say, like, we're right there, we're right in the middle of the action, like, we have the best perspective or content, or we're right in the middle of it, so we can tell you exactly what's going on. And there was actually a blurb that was caught on the game broadcast, and I kind of stopped it and screenshot it, and you just it's an illustration of kind of what I'm talking about. And the picture right here that I'm talking about is you'll be able to see two guys in NFL vests, and that is Luke Benna and Dane Van Wy. Those are the two producers for the franchise who on game day are getting sights and sounds from behind the bench. One of them's Dane's carrying around a boom pole, and Luke's got the camera. So a lot of those videos you see in the few days after the games from the sideline sound, that's where they're getting it. And those guys will utilize that as well for the franchise. But the context of what's happening right here, it's the very beginning of the second quarter. Andrew Wiley had just gotten hurt. Had gone down, I believe, with an ankle injury. He's getting checked out on the sideline, and they're showing Rick Burkholder, who's the Chiefs Vice President of Sports Medicine and Performance, checking him out. And then you see Dr. Paul Schreppel with the University of Kansas Health System in the black jacket right behind him. He's also known as the guy that ran out on the field in Denver and reset Patrick Mahomes' kneecap. So they're standing right there. And then you see the two producers, and then you see myself in the black hoodie for the radio network with my hand on my little buzzer talking to Dan Israel, the executive producer, letting them know what's going on with Wiley. But I think it's a great example of just seeing that the Chiefs in-house content people with Dane, Luke, and myself all within like 3 feet of Wiley getting checked out on the sideline, just making sure that we have, in a big moment, in a big situation, all the right information. I think fans a lot of times can see it on the broadcast and wonder who all those people are and wonder if it's a bunch of strangers surrounding the player. But rest assured, Wiley knows us all very well. So when he's looking around, it's not a bunch of strangers surrounding him. But I think to me, it's telling you something pretty cool, because you get to kind of see, in a way, the guys who are always behind the scenes, who aren't on camera, kind of in their element, doing their stuff with Dane and Luke and Paul and Rick Burkholder and those guys. So that's my Tell Me Something Cool, just kind of educating people a little bit on a picture from the Ravens game.
I like that too, and it shows. I think a lot of people don't realize who everybody is on the sidelines is too. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you identified. Just see those aren't just random people who are photographers that are lost, and so I think that's really, really cool backstory.
Yeah. And completely random, the girl in the red hair and the red polo over there works with our game entertainment staff, with Brad Young, Kristen Pugh, and all them. She's actually helping make sure they know when they're coming out of timeouts. And her name is Cassidy. She is a local radio DJ here, and I've actually known Cassidy since she was in kindergarten. We grew up together, her and her brother and myself. So it's just a big, happy family over there on the sideline.
I like that. It's a big little city. I love
Random. Well, Nick, that is all I've got. Do you have any parting words for the people? Those were our 5 segments for this week's In the Trenches.
Wash your hands for 20 seconds. Take this threat seriously. Pretend you have the COVID-19 and don't get it on anybody else.
Better be safe. Stay home. Figure out cool things to do. You said you had a Zoom meetup. You do have a Zoom happy hour?
Yes, we do. Yeah, with family and with friends, and then with work. So yes. So everyone's getting to use Zoom.
Doing some similar stuff. So everybody stay safe. Appreciate you listening to In the Trenches. We'll be back next week updating on whatever news happens between now and then. We appreciate you for listening. As always, rate, review, subscribe. Stay safe, and we will see you.
This is the Chiefs Official Podcast Network.